Good morning, everybody. Thanks a lot for coming this morning for this fantastic event. For those who don't know me, my name is Oliver Roost. I co-chair the Marketing and Communications Committee for the American Chamber of Commerce. And I'm really pleased to be able to have a topic with us here today around the digital environment, because I think it has significant relevance. And there's a lot of learning that needs to be done in the industry. And it's still a new industry that we're still getting to grasp with. But before I introduce the agenda, the speakers, I just wanted to say a couple of things. First of all, membership appeal, just so I keep Richard happy, and of course Michael in the back there. Those of you who have a red badge, like Richard, who is the chairman of the American Chamber of Commerce here in Hong Kong, is generally board members. Those that are in the yellow are generally committee members, so some sort of shape or form. And then those with blue are members, existing members. Those that are gray, would love for you to be a member, if that's possible. And Michael in the back there, I'm sure, would love to sign you up and to be having these events. I think the reason for these events, I think there are a lot of events that not only the Marketing Chamber, the Marketing and Communications Chamber does, but a lot of other events that are starting to become very topical, and we're revamping a bit about the engagement, about which topics are relevant for our audiences. And I do encourage you to participate in them as much as you can, because they're a great learning center where people share information. So on that note, I would just ask for the benefit of the speaker, those of you who have a mobile phone, can I just ask you to please put it on silent? I'm not asking you to switch it off, but certainly keep it on silent so it doesn't interrupt the speaker. And the topic of today, we're really glad to have Natascha Jacobovits to present us here about the digitally savvy consumer and how the digital world is evolving. Now, I think this is a critical topic for a number of reasons. One, the advertising and communication spend that gets done on the digital platform is somewhere in the region, Asia Pacific, or something in the region, about $1.8 billion US per annum. And you ask anyone how effective that spend is and how it's translating into either a better consumer engagement or a product uplift, it is not as productive as that money should be spent to be able to get that traction with the consumers. Second of all is there's a lot more innovation that's going on in this space than we've ever seen before, and the consumers are adapting it far faster. And so in a certain way, we're playing catch up to what the consumers are evolving on. And the question is, how do we then tie the different aspects of whether it's microblogging, whether it's social networking sites, whether it's your own branded hosted sites, whether it's your digital agency that's helping you with the communication angles, the smartphone penetrations and doing apps, how does all that interlink together to be able to provide a holistic engagement with the consumer is a really hard thing to do. And it's partly because there's so much going on in the industry that it's very difficult to find the right approach for the right set of consumers. So hence why Natascha was really very kind enough to offer to do a sharing about what her experiences are and whether she's engaged with her clients around the digital environments. And what is particularly what we need to look out for to make sure that we get this right as we move forward. So Natascha's got a wealth of experience. She's worked at Oliver Wyman, she's worked at Mercer. She's got a very nice background actually for this topic, and it works with some of my clients as well, which is fantastic. And we've been talking a bit about this, about how people need to adapt on that and to be able to execute on their digital strategy, have the right framework and the right recruitment, the right people to be able to deliver on that. So on that note, I'll hand over to Natascha, and thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. So good morning, everyone. I'm kind of glued to this spot because we're being videotaped and I'm speaking to the microphone, so I like to walk around a bit. So I'll do that very gently around the microphone. So let's talk digital. So in order to indeed engage with the consumer, you need to make sure that you have the right organization and that you have the right talent on board. Now the 6 things that you need to do to build a digitally savvy organization. And we'll talk you through those 6 things. First of all, you need to define digital. What is digital for your organization? Let me tell you an anecdote. About 2 years ago, I was asked to go and see the CEO of a global food retailing company. So walking, beautiful boardroom. He was a big football fan, so there were signed football jerseys of his national team on the wall. Clear picture of that. He said, Natascha, I've committed to my shareholders that my company will be digital in 2 years' time. So can you help me find a digital leader? So I said, great. But what's your digital business model? And he said, well, that's why I need a digital leader. So, and interesting enough, that was 2 years ago, but still today, that is a conversation that we very often have. Because we find at the very top of the companies, they're not quite clear on what digital can mean for them. We've broken digital down really in 4 main buckets. The first one is really around the brand engagement. The second, e-commerce. So selling physical goods or a service through an online transaction platform. The third is around data analytics, which now underpins other business models. But there are also companies where data analytics is at the core. And the fourth is a bit of a bigger bucket around innovation, new business models, mobile. It's really a product play. So this is around developing a new value proposition. For example, a bank wanting to enter new markets through branchless banking, requiring a whole new product. So digital is defined by the needs of the business. Therefore, there's also no one-size-fits-all talent. Once we had that discussion with this CEO, it was clear to him that there was obviously an opportunity for him to sell his food products online, but he also had a vision to sell information, to sell data. He said, just imagine a consumer walking into my store, grabbing a product, scanning it, immediately getting the information, so instant, real-time information for the consumer. This product contains wheat. Here is a recipe, and that across a whole set of products in the store. Now, those are both e-commerce and this information play are pretty big topics. And then he got concerned. He said, okay, but I can define that, but I don't know what ultimately the platform is going to look like. I can't fill in the details. And we said, that's fine. That's absolutely fine. Because this talent likes to create. This talent likes to fill in those gaps. But they need to know where they're going. And obviously, we need to make sure that we're finding the right talent for the task. Second, is that this digital talent wants to be measured. Overall, they're highly results-oriented, very ambitious. They want to know, what are my metrics for success? Any first interview, that's the question they'll ask you. How will you measure whether I'm successful? Third, you need to develop a common language for digital talent across the organization. Because you start hiring 1 or maybe 2 when you're putting together your capabilities. But then, of course, you're building a larger team. You might have a team at the center. You will have people in the countries. You want to make sure that everybody knows, what does digital talent look like? What does good look like for our organization? At Egon Zehnder, we focus on 5 core competencies when we talk about digital. The first is customer centricity. So as Oliver also said, digital is all about the customer. Think about it, think about yourself. Technology has completely changed the customer relationship and also your daily life. Everybody now depends on Google. We all want to go and find the information ourselves. So there's a very important pre-product phase. Once you know you want to buy something, once you know you're looking for something, a service, something very specific, you go onto Google and you look for the dimensions. You reduce the scope to be able to really find what you're looking for. Now, whilst you're doing that, you're actually leaving breadcrumbs out there. You're leaving breadcrumbs, who you are, what you're looking for. And the right digital organization can play into those breadcrumbs and bring you into their funnel. Another way of thinking about it is that the customer today doesn't want a mortgage or a credit card. They want to go shopping and they want a house. The second competency is results orientation. I mentioned that already, but also when you are hiring this kind of talent, look for the people who get things done. People can talk about talent, about digital, but not everyone can actually build something and get it out there. The third competency is adaptability. So in order to do this, you need to feel very comfortable with iteration and evolution. The great thing about digital is that what you put out there, you get immediate feedback on. It's all measurable. You get instant data. So when it doesn't work, that's fine. You adjust, you throw it out there again. You might know Booking.com, the hotels booking platform. Booking.com does 40 site releases a day. Let me give you some examples of what they do. You might all be familiar with A/B testing, when you show half of your audience one type of site, so with one change in the feature, and you show the other half something else. Very simple example. The price of a hotel room per night. Let's say it's $325. Booking.com would test whether they should show it 325,00 or 325.00. And what do they measure? The impact on their conversion rate. So which one of those numbers, the way they've displayed it, generates the largest conversion rate? And those are the tests they do. A blob on the right-hand corner, that's blue versus green. So you need to feel comfortable with iteration. Also, when you're building something from scratch, you might think you're going that direction, but once you're out there and you're testing it, and you see that actually that's not what customers respond to, you go back, you iterate, you try a different route. The fourth competency is around this data centricity. So really embracing analytics as an input into decision making. Amazon, on the extreme end, when they approach candidates first time round, they actually do a strategy consulting case over the phone. How many golf balls in Hong Kong? They test, do people think analytically? Data tells you a lot. The fifth competency is collaboration and influencing. So as a lot of what you're doing in digital is new, you need to really channel these new ideas. You need to convince the stakeholders. You need to get the rest of the organization along with you. A lot of this is about change. So can you not just have the vision, but can you communicate it? Can you socialize it? And very importantly, can you also engage at a very senior level, because that's where you need to have the commitment. So those are the 5 competencies. Going back to the 6 steps, now at the 4th step. Structure. Structure these digital roles thoughtfully, but keep the structure flexible. Because of this adaptability, because you don't exactly know where you're going to end up, you need to make sure that you're flexible. For example, if you're working with the head of digital and then people in the countries, you might decide originally that the people in the countries report directly to that head of digital, to the centralized head of digital. But then 6 months later or a year later, you might decide that actually no, they should report into the country directly with a dotted line into the center. We get asked this question all the time. We actually did a project about a year ago for, again, a retailer, an apparel retailer, who asked us for very specific advice. Okay, I really want to know what is best in class organizational structure for my e-commerce division. So we mapped out the organizational structure of around 8 companies. 4 of those were pure play online companies selling apparel, and 4 were multi-channel companies. We gave them the advice, and then 8 months later, actually no, 6 months later, I went back with my colleague and we looked at the results. We looked at the org charts that we had put together. All of them had changed. Some of them, it was a small change. There was 1 role that had changed, but all of them had changed. Should buying report into your head of e-commerce, or should it report into your group buying? So should e-commerce buying be a client of the group buying or of your e-commerce division? Those kind of questions. So keep the structure flexible. Also on structure, you need to have very clear, I would say, C-level visible commitment. This is about the long term. If you're just focusing on the short term, you're not going to be able to be successful. I'll give you another example. We're working for a global consumer electronics company. They had asked us to hire a head of the e-store for them. They were really a manufacturer, and they were selling through retailers, both online and offline. But they said, we need to bring that knowledge in-house. And you know what? We can actually sell accessories online. So headphones, things like that. However, they decided, despite our advice and other people's advice, they had decided that this person should report to their global head of sales. After 2 years, we had a review with the head of the e-store, who was just kept banging her head against the wall, because the head of sales was so focused on delivering his sales targets, which of course in the short term were much more about being generated by the stores than by the e-commerce channel, that he was not prioritizing this. So this reporting line is incredibly important. Don't have this report into anyone who has a short-term P&L target. There is cannibalization. And the only way to overcome that is if you align interests and you structure the roles in the right way. So I'm also telling you that there's no silver bullet answer to what is the right organizational structure. It needs frequent reviews. The 5th thing you need to get right is that you need to understand your attractability of those candidates and be realistic upfront. So that same food retailing CEO said, great, I'd like someone from Amazon or otherwise Google or eBay. Well, first of all, we then explain, well, we can imagine great brands, but those companies have very different business models. Google doesn't actually sell products online. They have no experience with physical goods retailing. But not only that, generally, talent that has only been with these pure players are not going to have the patience or even survive, and it's not going to be very good for your organization to bring those people in. They're used to working in a very fast-paced environment where everybody is looking for change, improvement. They will have very little patience for your legacy business. Also, demand for this talent is greater than supply. We're just at a phase, the cycle, where there are just not that many people around. This also means that compensation levels are rising and rising. So I'm seeing companies being very ambitious, very excited. This is our thing. Digital is our growth. We're all about innovation, and we've got a fantastic bucket of resources, money in terms of building the platform, developing new products. But then when it comes to the willingness to pay this digital talent, those things don't go hand in hand. And it all starts with the talent. It all starts with the leaders who are able to do this. The sixth step is the onboarding or the integration of such talent. For these kind of people, that is as important as hiring the right talent. I've already mentioned that if you hire someone who comes from a pure play, they might act like a bull in a china shop. But also they want to understand your culture. Help them to understand the legacy business. Help them find their way around the organization. Ideally, you create a culture of the digitally savvy people who are already in your organization. Try and put them together. So those are the 6 steps. Next question, of course, where do I find such talent? Well, although we describe these 4 buckets of digital, there's no need to look for people purely within one sector. So when you're looking for someone to run your e-commerce business in food retailing, you can look broader. As long as someone has online transaction experience, and also on the operational side, someone who has built a customer fulfillment center and fulfillment process, that's fine. The fact that this is food versus apparel, it's no problem. When you're looking for great people to do customer engagement, look at talent who's been in segments that are very actively competing for online customers. So think about dating, think about online recruitment, even think about gaming. It's all about the customer acquisition and the customer conversion. They know where to find the customer online. They know what their online behavior is. Here in Asia, the sectors that are most advanced are definitely travel and payments. So where we're seeing the most successful, the most experienced talents, it's in those 2 places. And then, of course, an additional important product or platform dimension to look for is mobile. There are a lot of markets here that are all about mobile first. An online desktop play is very different from a mobile play. So make sure you ask the people how the mobile customer is going to engage with this product or service. So what does that mean for you? Well, if you're building a digitally savvy organization, make sure that you take these 6 steps. So 1, define digital according to the needs and the opportunity of your business. 2, define the success metrics up front. 3, have a common language. So develop core competencies of digital talent for your organization. And this can be across functions. These are competencies. This is not the functional expertise. 4, don't get hung up on the organizational structure. You need to define something up front so that the candidates coming in or the people coming in know who they're reporting to, who they're working with, but keep it flexible. Think about your attractability. When you start interviewing, these candidates are going to ask you some very difficult questions. What are they looking for? Impact. They want to have impact. They want to create. Can you communicate to them that in this role, with your organization, they can do that? And 6, plan the integration of the new people coming on board. And that's really what I wanted to share with you. We brought some handouts here that I'll leave that you can take with you that are about the CMO function and how technology and this transformation is affecting the CMOs. So there's too much to talk about here, but you can read that later. So please, if there are any questions, do let me know.
So we're running Q&A, and if you could just ask, for those of you who don't know yet and haven't realized, I apologize for not saying this in the beginning, we're being filmed so that we can get on the digital platform for the American Chamber of Commerce. So if I could just ask those of you, when you ask a question, just to give a bit of a background for Natascha of who you are and where you work, it would be fantastic.
Lenny O'Connor, consultant. There's an interesting paper lately from McKinsey talking about the digital age, but also the IT functions and how the digital age impacts or requires almost a change in thought and a change in organization, perhaps a change in skills and technology for IT functions. So there you've hired your digital expert. He or she are going to start to work with the organization. What does that mean in terms of the IT function that already exists?
Yeah, great question. Thank you for that. So, indeed, in order to build this digital business, you actually need a number of capabilities. So this digital leader is generally more your business transformation leader. You then also definitely need a new kind of CIO, and I talk about a new kind of CIO because this needs to be someone who can think about scalability, who can think about the data platforms that are required to develop this big data hub, this tool. So generally, we're seeing companies starting with this digital leadership, then looking for CIOs. And they need to be peers, because there needs to be a healthy tension between those two. Because the CIO, of course, also needs to support the legacy business, the day-to-day business, whilst you're building this digital platform.
Not all. It's Richard Volstack from the American Chamber. The Chamber, a lot of our companies are not huge. They're really, medium-sized enterprises or NGOs and so forth. When it comes to, but also very much, if anything else, they probably need digital outreach better than even some of the bigger ones, no less anyway. The difficulty in hiring people, though, is knowing the vocabulary.
Yeah.
You look at a resume and listen, and interview somebody who's a digital person you think you want to bring on board. The problem is they speak a different language, certainly from usually the heads of the organizations. So what kind of temporary fix or assistance, what approach should a medium or small company do who wants to do this? How do they know they're hiring the right person and can do the right thing based on not only the resume itself, but also the kind of interview process?
Yeah, absolutely. What we're seeing is for smaller but also larger companies, this is also very much an issue for larger companies, is they are bringing consultants on board purely to help them with this process. So they'll bring someone on board who's a freelance talent advisor who has worked in one of these companies. There's a fantastic market now for recruiters who've worked in the in-house function of some of the larger digital companies who are advising companies, helping them through these phases. We're also seeing some smaller companies who are working with agencies, so digital agencies who've helped them build the website, who are helping them with their social media outreach, and they're pulling them in to help them with the interview phase.
Just a follow-up question on that. That answers the first half of the step, I think, very well. The second thing is, those of us who are kind of, in the Middle Ages as far as technology. When we first, as an organization, started building websites years ago, website companies crashed and burned on a regular basis, so everybody was kind of going through constant renewal of what they're going to do. Not that it's a whole lot better now, but it is significantly better. The question is, to your structure, flexible structure thing, again, a small, medium-sized enterprise, it's got their digital people on board, maybe one or two is all, and some people understand it, we've gone through it. Again, what is the process of renewal and resiliency to make sure you're not just sliding into a corner and then finally you find yourself with a lot of things you spent money on and time on, and this seems to be disassociated from the needs you have set up originally. Is there a way, maybe it's a consulting route, I don't know, but what is the way to test yourself before it's too late?
Yeah, that is a good question. How do you stay fresh? So what you see is there's a very active participation amongst digital people within their function. They create smaller communities. There are so many digital events out there, and I do encourage anyone in this digital space to participate in those events. And they can be around speakers, they can be around just getting to know each other. There are events for entrepreneurs. There are events at all different levels. And that's definitely also a question we ask candidates. Once you're in a role, or when we interview someone who's been in a digital role for some time, how do you stay fresh? How do you make sure that you continue to innovate? Because technology keeps changing. And they feel that they continue to be challenged by their network. What I see smaller companies do as well is they ask people to come in, so they use companies that they might want to ask for a service to actually come in and also educate them.
I'm Mark from representing Kerabeo Limited. We are a digital transformation consulting company. I have a question about, you spoke about the digital talents, how difficult it might be to integrate them, to have the right structure in your organization. But you also clearly said these people are coming from pure player like eBay, Amazon and so on, so they have a kind of background, the way how they move fast. So after a few months, few years, when they've learned the legacy business, when they have had their impact, how you make sure you can keep them in the organization, because these are the kind of people who want to move in a permanent way. So after a few months, a few years, they may think, well, I'm going somewhere else. How do you keep them in the organization? Or if you consider they will have to leave, how you make sure that you ensure that there will be something after their departure?
Yeah, absolutely. So also, as I said, these candidates or these people are generally very ambitious. So they will also ask about the career perspective at the beginning. But if it's set up the right way, and indeed they are in a role in a company that has big plans and where they can really have impact and they can create something, what they want to do ultimately is they don't want to just be a digital expert. Generally, these people want to come in owning a business. They want to lead a P&L, and that P&L they want only to get bigger and bigger. They see themselves ultimately as a business division leader or the head of that company. Now the question is, of course, whether they can develop their skill set, broaden their skill set, because not all of the digital talent have the leadership skills, and that is something that they will be looking for to learn within your company.
No. Hi, I'm Stephanie. I'm coming from text design. Actually, I'm from Eindhoven, right? Yesterday, I saw a page of newspaper talking about privacy ordinance, and the privacy authority actually speaks out. They receive complaints from the general public. Actually, the recruiters are trying to recruit people without putting their company names on the newspaper. We're at the stage of expansion. We're trying to find new talents. Would you recommend any good agents that could give me the right person?
Oh, that's a difficult one and hard for me. We work at the executive level, so I must admit that I'm probably not the best person to ask, but let me get back to you.
So, sorry, Natascha, one question, just following up from that digital savvy privacy ordinance. How much of the role do you see moving forward will start to interject into this data privacy discussion and personal privacy? Because at some stage, the information that organizations are collecting through those platforms and what those consumers are doing through cookies and everything else, how does that start to fold into the role itself? And as that moves forward, it gets more topical, more than it already is today. How does that sort of fit into this grand scheme of when we look for the right talent?
Yeah. At the moment, I think there's still a very healthy tension between consumers wanting to be engaged on a personal level. I don't know how many of you, for example, are using Google now. It's a fantastic app. It is so personalized. You land and immediately it shows you the weather in the country that you landed in, the currency, the conversion. It shows you the new time zone. It shows you the news. And that is just a basic level of personalization. But as I talked before about these different breadcrumbs that you leave out there, the consumer wants more personalized information. So data, of course, helps. And the only way you're going to receive something that is more engaging, that is more convenient to you, is if this data is allowed to be tracked and measured. At the moment, we're still seeing actually an uptick in the types of roles that are required for this. So there's still growth. For example, companies are now moving beyond just big data, which is around customer insights, into using what financial services have been using for some time, predictive analytics. And this is all about the future. This is not about what have you bought over the past 2 years, and therefore I recommend that you also buy X, Y, Z. But this is about, based on where you are now in your life cycle, this is where I predict that you're going to be, and the decisions that you're going to take, and the products you're going to buy. So at the moment, there is still a demand, a heavy reliance on this data. But of course, there's a lot of noise already around Facebook, about some of the other social media sites, around privacy. I haven't actually seen that much of a crackdown. But I agree with you, it's something to watch very carefully.
Peter Keller, I'm an NGO. Couple of clarifying kind of things. I'm perhaps come to something like this to learn. The first question I have is some of the terminology, as you pointed out. It might be school to everybody here, but what is an CMO and CIO?
So CMO is a Chief Marketing Officer.
Okay.
And
I failed that one.
Okay, and CIO, again, depends on which industry, but in the technology terminology, it's the Chief Information Officer.
Okay, I got that one right. Okay. The second thing is, how does one, you mentioned going to different functions or getting involved to stay abreast of what's happening. How does one, one could go on and look for this and get completely sidetracked into a whole bunch of stuff. Is there some way to focus on that particular aspect as opposed to just kind of Googling it and coming up with, you find out that you're traveling in the Maldives, before too soon, you know what I mean? I mean, how do you focus on whether they be forums, on particular aspects of staying abreast of what's happening?
Yeah.
I mean, you mentioned the Google thing of when you land, and I was thinking, my Google doesn't do that for me. I mean, how do I find out about that?
Gosh, I wish I could give you a menu of that, but of course, what would work for you would not work for someone else. So it's very, very difficult. I would say, do use Google to an extent to at least reduce your scope. But use it broadly. Use the key terms that would make it interesting to you. And then for the specific events, very important to look at, of course, who are the speakers. And there is a lot online that you can find out. And I would call one or two people. But again, it's very difficult for me to just give you kind of a clear-cut answer on that. Happy offline also to give you some advice specifically.
I'm a management consultant. And Natascha, you mentioned about customer centricity as one of the core competencies. Would you mind elaborate a bit more about its implications on digital strategy and also on digital talent acquisition? Especially given in today's Asia, different markets are evolving and they are at very different stage of development in terms of digitalization. For example, Thailand versus Indonesia versus Malaysia and China, they're all very different. Are there any commonalities across these markets, and also what's the implications on the overall digital strategy?
Yeah, no, absolutely. You said it yourself. I mean, it's very much the importance of localizing your strategy, your product, your service is absolutely key, because it's about the customer, the consumer. What do they want? Now, customer centricity, therefore, has to be built into your organization. What does that mean? You actually need a team of people to do the customer research on the ground. And you might think, whether you're a small organization or a large organization, I'm just going to hire an agency to do that. Try and do it yourself. Try and do it, even with a small team. There is so much you learn about the customer by being in the market, doing the kind of research. The best companies, the companies who have been successful in building, for example, a small mobile bank in Cambodia. ANZ did this, a small bank called Wing. What did they do? They put 4 people on the ground in Cambodia, and they went out and they just spoke to the different communities. And they asked them, how do you use banking products? Tell me a bit more about your daily life. Where do you get your salary paid? How do you make money transfers? How do you pay for your day-to-day living. And what are your pains in doing that? And by taking that approach, they defined the product proposition for Cambodia, what they wanted to build. And that will be very different from Thailand or the Philippines. It also depends, for example, on the penetration of mobile usage. It depends on what percentage of customers or potential customers owns a credit card. Can they actually make a transaction if you're wanting to sell them a product or a service online? Can they actually pay for it through a credit card? Or do you also need to find another payment mechanism? It has to start with this customer centricity. So there's a capability around customer experience. And it's about customer experience across all the different touch points. And you've got to understand that, define that. So absolutely localizing, going into the market yourself, understanding who the customer is, what they want.
Hello, I'm Brandy. I'm working for financial PR. But I have a question regarding the your recruiting. My question is that is there any difference? I mean, big difference when you're recruiting the executives of digital field other than any other fields? Yeah.
You mean digital function, or do you mean for the pure digital companies?
Both. Yeah. Do you have any difference compared with other industries or other companies?
Yes, absolutely. For these digital functions, there's still so much unclarity. So we take a much more consultative approach. We really spend a lot of time up front to help to define the role and how that fits with the business model. But we also actually show our clients the kinds of people they should not be hiring. So very much to your question around the terminology, we actually also, we really go through probably a broader list of candidates where we describe, okay, these are the people who would not fit. So for example, if you're looking for someone to do e-commerce, to show someone from Google and then to explain why that wouldn't fit. So it's a lengthier process, but by spending that time up front, by the time we get to interviewing candidates, everyone's on the same page and we all know what we're looking for. We also spend a lot more time on the interviewing because generally, often the people who are looking for this talent don't quite know what they're looking for, and they don't quite speak the language. So we spend time up front defining the questions that we know the candidates are going to want to have answered.
Just a comment on the data privacy topic that came up before. The digital age is moving much faster than governments respond so far or prediction so far into data privacy legislation. Data privacy legislation exists. In the last 3 years, many governments have upgraded or updated their data privacy protection laws. The most recent one is Singapore government, but it's still not catching up. It's still slower than the data, that the personal data that is being provided and is out there on various sites and in the public domain.
Okay.
Hi there. I have a question. My name is Wayne. I come from an online marketing firm called MWI. Based on your experience in recruiting for very large enterprises, how do you draw the line where sometimes, okay, not for a company with a massive global footprint, clearly they want to do that kind of work in-house, but how do you help clients sometimes decide whether they should be bringing in outside help or whether they should be bringing a CMO or a social campaign function, and they should be bringing in consultants or agencies for that?
It depends. Often, what can be the case is if you want to change, if you want to bring this in at a high pace, it can be quite difficult to really internalize it. Also, if you are unable to bring in new talent really on your payroll, but at the same time you really want to learn about digital, then what companies also do is they build kind of an external network. So they do work with agencies, they do work with advisors, but they think very smartly about how they tie each of those advisors, each of those agencies into someone in their organization so that they learn. So for example, they might have one agency who is developing an app for them. They might use another agency who's developing their website. Another one who is doing their performance marketing. And thereby you have this cross-fertilization of skills, of talents. And as long as you have people in the organization who have strong affinity with digital, who are really willing and able to spend the time with those advisors, I've seen it work. And of course you speed up. You were able to get something out there very quickly.
No, we're getting short of time, but I have a more generalized question I think relates to all this in maybe different ways. This refers to your point throughout the presentation on the importance of staying on top of change, being adaptable, and out there reaching out to new things are happening, and staying informed. So my question is the impact of digitalization on parenting. So essentially, parents are trying to keep their kids, to read books and go to class and get off the Facebook and so on and so forth, and all the deep dives they're doing on everything that's digital. Yet if we're successful in doing that, it looks like we're setting them up for failure. So my question is, when you step back on just the education of children, how is the role of their time and efforts and prioritization of digital learning redefining what parents should be doing and what kind of priorities they set?
That's a very philosophical question. I struggle with that every day with my 8 and 10-year-olds who are definitely grabbing their iPod whenever they can. It's so difficult because on the one hand you see there's one company after the other that's popping up in education that is being digitally enabled. So coming up with a new iPad, coming up with a new interactive board for the class. And these kids are of course already looking at the screens all the time. So do they really need to start looking at the screen in the classroom as well? Sorry, did you want to?
Go ahead.
Yeah. So how, your question is, as I understand, very much about what it's doing ultimately for these children? Well,
I'll let me be more precise. There's an example. There was a cover story in Atlantic Monthly 8 years ago, probably. The title of the story was, "Is Google Making Us Stupid?" Mm. And the thesis was that people were becoming more pancake people. We knew a little bit about a lot of things, but not much in depth. And I think the basic thesis was, so sustained reading beyond 12 minutes, 6 minutes, a tweet is challenging. So the question pedagogically was, with digitalization, with the access and so forth, how do you balance the great capability and breadth of knowledge that's instantly at your fingertips, but the capability to do a deep dive and sustained study, sustained deeper and deeper investigation as a way not only for kids, but for adults. And that was the challenge. That was roughly 8 years ago. I don't see that being addressed in constructive ways yet. I'm just curious if you have.
No, I must admit I haven't. I'm also seeing companies really struggle with this because, of course, there are so many opportunities. Digital is providing them quite an easy way to try and test to go into new areas. But interesting enough, those companies that have really been able to focus are the ones that are most successful. Take Priceline. 90% of their business is made up by Booking.com. I mentioned them earlier, hotel bookings platform. They're now a $25 billion company. Why are they so successful? Because they have purely focused on hotels. People even within the organization, but also outside, kept coming to them saying to the founders, why don't you also go into train tickets or museum tickets or do a deal and also do flight tickets? They didn't do it. They actually had kind of a naysay moment every month. They kept focused. So I completely agree with you. I think there will come, the cases will come out where also for kids, for their education, it will require them to be focused, and they'll probably be so relieved that they're not expected to know everything or a little bit about everything. There is a lot of interest right now from the venture capital community investing in education companies, especially, of course, in China, where through digital enablement, it is easier for people to really become an expert on a topic, on one functional topic. So there are some developments, but ultimately, just translating back into talent, we've got to look for people who can prioritize.
Okay, we've probably got time for one more question if there's one available.
Hello, I'm April from Inhouse. Our company actually is a cloud technology business consulting company. I'm very glad that you have mentioned a lot about Google Ads. Actually, my company is using too. And when it comes to customer relationship management, I would like to know more about your experience of using it. What tool and why you are using that tool, and how you are using that tool. For example, like when it comes to CRM, customer relationship management, what kind of tool you are using it to manage your customer base?
Well, in our business, we use actually a custom build tool. But what I was talking about was Google Now. Is that what you're referring to? I think you're mentioning Google Analytics.
Well, I would like to say actually, according to my experience, a lot of companies, especially those SMB, they may using Microsoft software like Excel, PowerPoint, those kind to manage their customer data. And a lot of them, they are now using some digital and cloud technology to run their business. For example, like Salesforce.com, and S3, something like that. And I would like to know more about your experience of using those kind of cloud technology to manage your customers.
Okay, well, I've got to disappoint you there, because in my business we don't use those tools. I work with clients who use those tools. So in our business, when it's around sort of developing a solution to keep track of our clients and our candidate base, and we have something custom built. But what we're seeing, of course, what we're thinking, spending a lot of time thinking about, is actually the rise of LinkedIn. And what does that mean? What does that mean for our business? We're definitely seeing companies using in-house recruiters a lot. At our level, when we hire people at the executive level, we still bring our advice, we bring our insights, and LinkedIn doesn't reach there. But there are, of course, lots of technologies affecting every single segment. On marketing specifically, unfortunately, I can't give you specific advice. But again, happy to talk to you offline about that a bit more.
So thanks a lot for the questions. As I close, I just want to leave you with one story that just happened 2 days ago, where I was with a client, and this resonates very much to what Natascha was talking about. And it's a fairly sizable organization, certainly not an SME, but it's a pretty large organization globally. And we had a discussion about their digital optimization of their digital strategy, and we started talking about how you engage with the consumers, to the consumer centricity point. And the individual in the role, and I won't name who the company is or anything, but the individual in the role said, I don't see the digital environment. I don't experience it myself. I will only communicate to my consumers through traditional forms of medium and vehicles such as TV, outdoor, because I don't understand the digital platform. That was the starting comment from one individual in this one fairly sizable organization, global organization. And that sent the shivers down my spine, because you start to think about where the consumers are going, and to have the right talents to manage the digital organizations in companies is critical for the future. It's where the consumers are going, it's how we're engaging much more with media. So I really appreciated Natascha's sharing today, and certainly thank you very much. And as a small token of our appreciation, I wanted to give you a small gift from the American Chamber of Commerce.
Thank you.
Thank you.